for some more creepy content. Seeing that this is going to be a long video, let's just get on with it. All the information will be down below.
Nightmare Files.
A few years ago, I took my family up to the cabins by the lake because I just won a big case against some drug dealer. In the middle of the night, my wife woke me up shaking my shoulder pretty hard. She told me that someone was banging on our door. I thought to myself, why would someone come to our cabin in the middle of the night? I got up to go check the door and my wife tried to hand me my bat, but I told her I wouldn't need it. The person kept knocking and I opened the door. It was a kid standing there. I asked him, "What are you doing here?" Then he started running. So I chased after him as my wife watched. He kept running in circles, then he tripped and I grabbed him and asked him, "Why are you knocking at our door in the middle of the night?" The boy said, "'Cause my uncles told me to." I asked, "What? Why?" The boy hesitated and looked me straight in my eyes and said, "To get you out of the house." Simultaneously, I hear my wife scream out my name in horror, and I hear footsteps running right behind me.
Damn, dude, you know what I would do? I'd grab that fucking child and drag him back to that house. Because I swear to God, if my family ever got hurt, I don't care who the hell you are. I don't care if you're a child. If my family's in danger, somebody's going hostage. Like, somebody's getting hurt. Shit.
I turn around and I see 4 hooded men running toward me.
Ooh.
I reacted so quick that I ran over the kid. I see my wife and she ran off the porch ready to swing the bat, but I yelled at her to get back inside and called the cops. The guys were chasing me and were about 15 feet behind me. I made it inside the cabin, grabbed my cell phone and I called the cops. When the police officers arrived, they noticed that those guys went through our car and stole some of my information. Who were those guys? And what would have happened if they would have caught me? I know the situation could have been worse. They could have went inside the cabin with my kids and my wife, but what did they want with me? After that night, we never went back to that cabin.
I wouldn't. Should have had a gun.
The first time I moved away from home, I lived in an old cabin in the woods that I rented for really cheap. I'd never had a good night's sleep there. I always tossed and turned and woke up several times during the night. But it wasn't until after a few weeks that things got really weird. In the beginning, it were just small things that I really didn't think about too much, like keys missing and cups and plates not being where I left them. Then I started waking up in the morning to find various drawers open and things laying out around like someone had been in a hurry searching for something. I even came home to a wide open main door and decided to change the locks. But even then, when I was home, with the door locked, I could walk past and just in the corner of my eye, see the door slide open. One time, I was cat sitting one of my friend's cats and it would just sit for hours in the middle of the room and toss its tail from side to side and watch as if it was following something around the room with his eyes. It creeped me out. If you can only imagine what it felt like to see this cat slowly following something that floats randomly around the room and finally stop right beside you, imagine how that would feel. After a while, I just could not live there anymore and finally moved out.
Especially if animals are freaking out, man.
This story is totally true. It happened to me when I was about 4 years old. My dad used to really like going on vacation with me and my family. One time, we went to what I think was Big Bear, but I'm not sure. Anyways, we rented a cabin. I don't remember much, but I remember the inside of the cabin was beautiful. The furniture was all colorful and decorated in Christmas colors, but it was around Christmas time. It was very roomy, and it was 2 floors and had its own den, kitchen, and bedroom. We arrived during the day, and everything seemed normal. When night came, however, we started hearing noises. It sounded like someone was shaking the front doorknob trying to get in. I was the first to notice, and I told my mom, but she didn't believe me. Then she saw it too. For a couple of minutes, the front doorknob just kept shaking by itself, and we were too afraid to go look out the door. Then we heard another noise. It sounded like steel hitting steel. Then it stopped. My dad was afraid someone was trying to break in, so we packed up all of our things so we can leave. But before we did, my dad called the police and asked them to come search the premises. We exited out the back door because the noises were coming from the front. Our car was down the hill from the back of the cabin. I fell asleep in the car and woke up the next morning in a small rinky-dink motel room that was nothing as roomy and beautiful as the cabin. I was so bummed, but I was quickly relieved we had left because later that day, we found out who was making those noises. The police had arrived there and searched the outside and found nothing. Then they went inside and found a man that had 2 hooks instead of hands. He had been twisting the doorknob with his hook.
Damn.
Then he clashed his hooks together, and that's what we heard was it still on steel. We found out that about 5 minutes...
Straight Candyman action, man. Oh my god, that would... No, man. I would have nightmares for the rest of my days if I ever encountered something like that. Hell no.
After we left the cabin, he successfully broke in and started searching for us. The police found bodies stashed in the upstairs closet. When we were on our way home from the motel, we stopped at a gas station near the cabin where the madman had tried to break in. My mom knew it was a bad idea, but my dad told her to relax.
Well, I mean, like, if he's got a hook for hands, you should be able to defend yourself with a broom or something. I'm thinking, like, he's not able to do much to you. I mean, just some food for thought.
Cops took care of that guy. He's nowhere near us. We all went into the little shop to buy some candy and snacks. We were quite surprised when we came out of the shop and headed back to our car. There was a note on the hood that read, "There's more of us. See you soon." It's safe to say that we never went back to that cabin again.
Man, I wouldn't.
My friend told me this story about him and his family going camping at these campgrounds. His brother worked there and they were really cool with the family that owned it. On the second day, as it was getting dark, my friend and his brother, who was a regular counselor there for the past few years, went for a walk which led them down the winding dirt road to another cluster of cabins. They could both tell there was something wrong, but they couldn't place it. My friend several years later told me that it felt like something looked completely ordinary, but it didn't feel like it was ordinary. His other brother would attribute to what he noticed next. The furthest cabin from the entrance had all the windows closed. Then he heard a loud thud, and then the lights in the cabin were on. Now it wasn't uncommon for the other cabins to be rented out by hunters in the winter, so he left it alone even though he still had a strange vibe and decided not to investigate further. The next morning during breakfast, he was speaking to the camp director and casually asked him how many other cabins he was planning on renting that hunting season, and mentioned that he had noticed that another cabin was being used back towards the far side of the camp. The director had a stunned look on his face and then told him to call the police and that they weren't renting out any of the other cabins that weekend. The police showed up, and after a 2-hour standoff in the middle of the woods, ended with a man in custody. For the past 3 weeks, there had been a dangerous man hiding out in the summer camp.
Wow.
My friend didn't know at the time, but later was told by his brother that they took him out and he was starving and unshaved. He had a...
I was just say, don't you usually have like a The hell is that type of person that walks around campgrounds and shit? Like, I want to say a guard, but some type of camp official. You know what I mean? Patrolling the grounds and shit. Like, I don't care what it is. I'm thinking there's got to be some type of guard patrolling. Like, how the hell do you get away with that shit?
Full pistol and a shotgun, and 2 duffel bags full of valuables that had been taken during violent break-ins over the past month in the surrounding counties. Ever since then, we're more cautious about what we run into in the woods. I work in an outdoor field and lead trips regularly. I once led a trip to the top of Mount Stringer in North Carolina. It's a tough climb to get to the top and about 6 miles from the nearest road. I was leading a group of 8 middle school kids and had 1 co-instructor. We were camping out on top of the mountain, and it was a beautiful night with the full moon. The kids and the other co-instructor went to bed in their tents. I chose to spend the night in the hammock that night. I was really into the book I was reading, so I stayed up until around 10:30 p.m. I turned my headlamp off to settle in for the night. Everything around me was rather bright from the moon and from the position I was in. I could see down the trail we had hiked to get up to the top. I lay there enjoying the scenery and noticed something moving on the trail. Bears are common in the area, so I perked up. As it got closer, I could tell it was a person. We were in the middle of nowhere, and there was someone hiking up the trail with no headlamp on. I was just frozen watching this person move closer to our camp. He arrived at the top of the mountain where we were and just stopped. I watched as what appeared to be a man surveying our camp. I really could only see the outline of him. He stood there for what seemed like 30 minutes, but it may have been 10. He then turned, sat down under a tree facing our camp. After that, he put some type of electronic device over his eyes, and it had a green glow by his eyes. I think they were night vision goggles. He just sat there staring at our camp. So I closed my eyes and I left them open enough so I could see. He then started to rub his pants. I had no idea what to do, honestly. I decided to wait it out. So I just sat there, just staring at the man while he stared at my camp. This went on until about 3:30 a.m. Then he stood up. He took a moment to survey my camp, and a few minutes later, he went back down the trail he came up on. I, to this day, have no idea what that was all about, but it definitely freaked me out.
Right?
I was paranoid that we were being followed for the rest of the trip. I couldn't enjoy it. But anyways, I hope that never happens again.
I mean, why wouldn't you confront the guy? Like, I don't care who you are, man. Like, you ain't watching me while I'm trying to sleep.
Last year, I was with a buddy of mine and we were going to the Hart Creek Scramble in Alberta. But my friend has health problems, so instead of the hard trails, we did the easy one. Now we're both climbers and have been to Hart Creek for rock climbing in the past and had a great time, so it wasn't a surprise to see the sporadic climbers on the mountains. Hart Creek is also pretty popular and easy for people who just want to go for a nice nature walk or maybe have a picnic. Anyways, so we walked in, enjoying the day watching climbers on our way by. We saw a couple even doing multi-pitch climbing, which means basically leapfrogging up the route. We settled in for lunch about a half hour later and left a couple hours after that. On our way back, I remember seeing a climbing shoe in the creek and thinking, oh, someone must have lost this. I picked it up when my buddy got my attention and I looked further downstream. Both climbers, a young man and his partner, were both lying in the creek bed, rope and harness still attached, dead. It was very surreal. We had seen these people climbing not 2 hours before, making their calls, having a good time. The first reaction I had was that I remembered that there was a family right behind us, a husband and a wife with a young daughter who were playing in the creek on the way down. So we ran back to go stop the family as quietly as we could, just to let them know what was happening. So they started to walk up, and it turned out that the husband was an off-duty police officer, so he took control of the situation. I learned later that we weren't the first ones on the scene and that the authorities had been called. Needless to say, that was a very quiet ride back into town that day.
I don't know what to say about that one.
Over the years when I've told this story, many people haven't believed me, but it's true, I swear. My brother and I were hiking out in our new backwoods. We had just moved to a new house, and we stumbled upon a small open field. In the center of it, there was a person with a blue jacket crouched over. We thought it was a new friend of ours that we just met, so I ran out to meet him. I did not have my glasses on at the time, but I got pretty close enough to see that it was a grown man leaned over a carcass of a deer, stabbing it and eating it with an unsharpened stick. He looked up and saw me. I was pretty freaked out, so I turned around and yelled at my brother to run. And so we started to sprint as fast as we could back home. We saw the man behind us with blood all around his mouth, and he was smiling.
Damn, dude.
When we got home, we told our parents, and they called the cops. They searched the area but never found the guy. After that, we barely went outside in fear of the guy and what he would do to us if he caught us.
Right. Wow.
This past winter, I hiked one of the high peaks in the ADKs with a buddy of mine, and we camped out every night. Everything was fine the entire first day. We had a great night's sleep, and we woke up early to hike back to the parking area. On the way back down the trail, my friend and I noticed that someone else had been hiking as well. About a mile after walking, I stopped and I saw that my full name, first name, and last were drawn into the snow on the side of the footpath.
Oh, hell no.
But I didn't do it.
Screw that.
Neither did my friend. It was snowing a bit throughout the night,
But like, nope.
and
I'm
if
done.
it was drawn
I'm going
the day
home.
before, the snow would have covered it up. We got a bit freaked out, and we decided to hustle back to our car so
Does it
we
say
could get the
little?
hell out of there. We finally get back to the parking area, and I go to sign myself out of the registry book. When I turn the page where I signed in, I see that someone had scribbled out all of my information to where you couldn't read it anymore. No one else has signed into the book besides myself for 3 days. I guess I won't be going back there anytime soon.
Jeez. I think places like that would have a camera or some type of thing where you'd see the person. Unless you're talking way
One
back
day,
then.
I went camping in the back country of Quebec with a few of my friends, and we were pretty much all alone for what we thought. While laying in our sleeping bags, we heard shuffling outside of the tent one night, but wrote it off as a raccoon or a possum. We woke up in the morning with scattered cigarette butts all around the front of our tents, as if someone stood there all night keeping an eye on us. Nothing happened after that except for some thunderstorms and bear sightings, but
Yeah, but the thing is, like, you can tell the difference between an animal running through the woods and then a human just because of the size, you know, like the impact of the running on the ground. Like, freaking, it's gonna be a lighter animal than compared to a human. We're just much heavier. You'd just be able to tell. Unless you're deaf, then you're kind of screwed.
seeing those cigarette butts definitely freaked us out. I had 3 really good friends, and their names were Kevin, Ryan, and Tommy. Every summer our parents would take us on a vacation. We always stayed in a remote cabin in the forest of Minnesota. The cabin was located on a large island in the middle of Lake Vermilion. Eventually, when we were old enough, Our parents let us go to the cabin on our own for the first time. When we got there, we parked the car on the gravel road beside the lake. Then we had to take a boat across the lake about half a mile to reach the cabin. There were a few other cabins on the island, but they were all at least half a mile away. The cabin was quite small and only had a kitchen, a bathroom, and 2 bedrooms. At night, it was pitch black. There were no street lights for miles, and the only light came from the moon. There were no curtains on the windows, so when you were sleeping at night, you could see the moon shining down on the trees and the lake outside. On the third night of our trip, we set up a campfire by the edge of the lake. The moon was full and a pale white glow was shimmering across the lake. We were gazing up at the stars when all of a sudden we heard a splashing sound, as if something was moving about in the water. Ryan suddenly stood up and pointed, saying, "What the hell is that?" We all looked in the direction he was pointing, peering into the darkness. After a while, I couldn't make out he was pointing at. I'll never forget the feeling of terror that came over me. The hair on the back of my neck stood up, and goosebumps appeared on my arms. I was paralyzed in fear. Out in the middle of the lake, there was a woman's head. It was just floating there on the surface of the water, staring directly at us. She had pale white skin and long black hair. Her hair was matted to her face. The rest of her was submerged or not even there. We tried to tell ourselves that it was just a loon. They are black and white birds that hunt at night, diving deep into the water. It didn't look like a loon, but that's what we tried to convince ourselves it was. We threw some more wood on the fire and tried to forget about it, but it still gave me the creeps. About an hour later, I had to go to the toilet, so I walked down to the edge of the dock and peed into the lake. Looking out over the moonlit lake, I noticed the thing was still there, but now it was...
Man, have you ever heard of the buddy system? When you see shit like that, you hear shit like that, have your buddy come with you. My guy, he doesn't have to watch you piss, but he can at least be next to you, you know, have a gun with him, a knife, any type of thing. Don't just go by yourself. That is like the most, like, out of all the horror stories, it's always just the one person going out and something happening. You think you'd learn? Think all these movies, you'd learn. No, we're not going to learn. Oh, you're going to learn today.
Closer. It still looked like the woman's head, and it still seemed to be staring right at me.
Screw that.
Its face was still extremely pale, as if it hadn't been out in the sun for years, and I could easily make out some facial features. The eyes and the nose.
Be like,
a feeling of incredible unease came over me as I realized it couldn't be a loon. There was no way a loon could just tread water for that long.
Hell no, man.
There were no ripples around it either. It wasn't moving at all. It was just standing there, stiff as a board, submerged in the water. I immediately zipped up my pants and ran back up to the dock to where my friends were, sitting around the campfire. I told them what I'd seen, but none of them dared to go down to the dock to take a closer look.
Why not?
We tried to tell ourselves it was just a log or a tree branch, just floating out in the water. I could tell everyone else felt uneasy too.
The funny thing is, it's like you got the numbers. I mean, you could check it out. I'm not saying you should, but you're usually a little more courageous when you got more people with you. You're less scared. If you're by yourself, that's a whole different matter, man. Just like, I wouldn't do that by myself. But if I got my buddies with me, as long as you got a knife, gun, whatever the case may be, I'll check it out. But, I mean, it's up to you.
None of us really believed that. We went back into the cabin and we shut the door, locking it behind us. It was very late and we just needed sleep. None of us mentioned a thing in the lake. We were all trying to avoid talking about it, honestly. There were no curtains on the windows, and I was getting ready for bed. I couldn't help but taking one last look. Peering out of the window, I could see the lake clearly, illuminated by the full moon. But the thing wasn't there anymore.
Oh, Jesus.
It had completely vanished.
Of course it did.
I let out a sigh of relief, thinking It was a log that just floated away,
Uh-huh.
or else it sank below the surface.
Always.
Or perhaps it had been a loon, and it finally flown away. It was very hot that night, and we had to sleep with the windows open. My friend Tommy and I slept in one bedroom, and my two other friends slept in the other.
And that is how, ladies and gentlemen, you get grabbed in the middle of the night. I hope to God you're a light sleeper. Just hope to God.
We left our bedroom doors open. I was finding it hard to sleep, very, very hard. It was the middle of the summer and there wasn't even a slight breeze. The heat was stifling. As I lay there, I thought I could hear someone walking around outside the cabin. I kept my eyes tightly shut
Oh yeah.
and tried to tell myself it was just my imagination. It sounded like someone with bare, wet feet pacing back and forth. I was trembling with fear, but I felt so weak I couldn't move. The footsteps, they sounded like they were walking up the steps to the cabin door. I wanted to shout out to my friends, but I was frozen in terror. Then the footsteps turned around and sounded like they were running down the steps and toward the lake. After a while, the footsteps faded away, and there was only silence. I reached over and shook my friend Tommy. He was already awake and he claimed he had heard the footsteps as well. Just then, I was startled to see Ryan coming running into our room. When he stepped into the moonlight, I could see his face and the expression on it was very, very disturbing. He told us we need to leave. I asked why. What did you hear? He said, let's just go. He insisted. Let's get to the boat and it's time to go. He wouldn't answer. He just ran back into his room. We followed him and found Kevin sitting on his bed, already packing up his things. Ryan was running around frantically grabbing his stuff and stuffing it into a bag. What's wrong? I demanded. Ryan, what the hell is wrong with you? Tell us. He just stopped in his tracks and stared at me. There was a haunted look in his eyes. I would never forget what he said. He told us he was turning over in his bed to get more comfortable when he suddenly saw at the top right corner of his window, someone was peeking in.
Oh hell no, man.
As soon as he set his eyes on
Oh
it,
my God.
the face vanished. He said all he saw was long black hair hanging down the window, ghostly white skin, and one large eye staring at him. When he said that,
It's The Grudge. It's all like. Well, I can't exactly do The Grudge, but I think it's basically similar.
it chilled us to the bone. We realized that if the face was in the top right corner of the window, that meant the thing had to be damn near 8 feet tall, or else floating in midair. I felt like I was going to be sick. Let's just go, Ryan said in a very serious tone. Let's just go now. We all agreed and packed our stuff up as quickly as we could. We grabbed our bags and ran out of the cabin, locking the door behind us. As we scrambled down the front
Why would you
steps,
bother locking it?
I glanced to
Just
the
take
side
off.
and I saw
Just
footprints, bare, wet footprints, in the dirt all around the cabin. We ran down to the boat and threw our stuff in. We untied the boat from the dock and we sped off. I looked back over my shoulder and stared at the island, but I didn't see anything moving. However, I had the strangest feeling that someone or something was watching us. When we finally reached the other side of the lake, we tied up the boat, stuffed our backpacks in the car, and drove off. We had been driving for about 10 minutes when, out of the blue, Ryan suddenly broke down sobbing. He kept saying over and over, "What was it, guys? What was it? What did we see?" On the way, we called our parents to tell them what happened. Ryan was freaking out, and we didn't know what to do. They told us to just get home safely and quickly. My friend's dad went up to the cabin a few days later and said he saw nothing out of the ordinary. However, he did mention that there were bare, wet footprints all around the cabin, which he thought was odd. Whatever Ryan saw in the window really hit him hard. After his breakdown, he had trouble sleeping and ended up having to go into therapy.
I wouldn't be able to go camping.
They gave him some pills to calm him
Simple
down
as that.
and allow him to get a decent night's sleep. As time went
For the
on,
rest of my life.
he recovered and ended up being fine. But to this day,
How do you recover from
he
something
still
like that?
can't sleep unless the curtains on his window are completely shut. To this day,
Have some
I still
bars
cannot
on it.
explain what we saw on the lake that night. I never went back to the cabin. Tommy and Kevin have both gone back and everything was fine. But Ryan refuses to go back, and frankly, I'm with him on this one.
Right. My God, man. Screw that. Hell to the no. Anyways, dude, like 10 minutes ago, I was 90% sure this is the one story, the very last story with the cabin. I was 90% sure that was the same story I've been searching for, almost a year. I heard the same story. I don't know by who, what YouTuber. But I don't know if Nightmare Files, if this is a re-upload. I am not sure, but now hearing this full story, I remember this one. This is the one I've been searching for so long, because it was just, oh man, it was just a good story. But yeah, anyways, check out Nightmare Files, man. He makes a lot of great videos. I mean, he's just got that knack for it. I don't know if it's just his voice or just that good storytelling, but yeah, definitely check him out. Subscribe to him. You know, give him some love, because he definitely needs it. We all need it. Other than that, I hope you guys enjoyed, and subscribe to me, Kaizen Chigyu Productions. But I'm also thinking about calling my group, you know, all my subscribers. I think we're just going to go by the name of Zen Gang, you know. So, I don't know yet. I'm still figuring all that stuff out. But other than that, I will see you guys next time with more horror stories. And I haven't decided yet. But other than that, take care, guys. Peace.